poppin' variants? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show. After Loki Episode 3 introduced us to the origins of Kang through his snake oil salesman of a variance, Victor Timely, the ambitious Ravonna Renslayer learns that there is a deep dark secret that He Who Remains was keeping from her during her countless eons of servitude as director of the TVA. A revelation that would render Ravonna Renslayer enraged. But what could that big secret be? And also, how exactly could both Victor Timely and Ouroboros factor into the secret sinister plans of He Who Remains? And while we're at it, let's talk about the potential applications of a miniaturized time loom, and how a tiny time loom in the wrong hands could potentially spell trouble for the future. So let's dive into all of this carnival chaos together, my nerd babies. Alright, so let's begin this video by talking about Ravonna Renslayer and the secret Miss Minutes is gonna tell Ravonna that's gonna make her real mad. And I have a feeling that the secret most likely has to do with Ravonna Renslayer having been betrayed by He Who Remains in the past. Because let's face it, so far in the MCU, Kang doesn't have the best reputation for loyalty and teamwork. So much so that the entire multiverse is now at risk because the Council of Kang Gang started beefing with each other for territory, like this was freaking TVA San Andreas. And this incredibly strong capacity for selfishness is a personality trait that is deeply seated within Kang's nature, it seems, as we can see it manifest in Kang's early days when he was just the inventor Victor Timely, especially when he tells that interested buyer of his imperfect mini time loom that he doesn't do partners.
No, I don't do partners.
And we of course see that selfish mentality come out again later in the episode when he betrays Ravonna after she revealed that her motivation to work with him was purely out of professional gain, while Victor Timely, on the other hand, wanted someone to have a romance with.
I have high hopes for this partnership.
You heard her, Victor. Partnership. You had to do it.
And considering how the TVA boardroom recording from episode 1 reveals a conversation between Kang and Renslayer that has Kang thanking Renslayer for making a difference in the multiversal war of the past, teasing at a close relationship between the two, the most likely scenario to me is that the version of Kang who would become He Who Remains cheated Ravonna Renslayer out of a high position of autonomy and power, likely a position equal to that of Kang's himself as his co-conqueror. Because if you know anything about Ravonna Renslayer from the comics, then you know that she and Kang have a tightly knit and extremely complicated toxic history together, both as passionate lovers and as bitter enemies in combat and conquest. And it's during a period of intense hatred towards Kang that Ravonna Renslayer becomes the badass savage of a warrior who calls herself the Terminatrix, a name that was actually teased during the Loki finale when Hunter B-15 tracks down Renslayer's vice principal of a variant by the name of Rebecca Tormenay, with Tormenay of course hinting at the Terminatrix. Now, this all being said, much like Rebecca Tormenay's fate was written by He Who Remains to be a vice principal at a high school and not a full-on principal, He Who Remains likely wanted his Renslayer variant to be a vice head of the TVA and not one of the people with ultimate authority like him. Kang is an astronomically selfish person who does not like having long-term partners at all, and Ravonna Renslayer unfortunately possesses an ambition that seeks to rival his own. Even if He Who Remains did feel deep affection for Ravonna Renslayer at some point in the past like Kang did in the comics, his selfishness would inevitably keep him from sharing anything that he's conquered with her, likely due to a deeply seated fear of betrayal rooted in him due to Kang seeing so much of his own ambitious self within Ravonna. So I wouldn't be too surprised to hear if Ravonna Renslayer was immediately betrayed and mind-wiped by Kang after his victory in the Time War so that Ravonna forgot her promised seat at the end of time, while still being awarded for her service by being allowed to call all the shots in the TVA as the TVA's director. And this would very much be a perfect metaphor for a toxic relationship in my opinion, because it shows that Kang would much rather manipulate Ravonna into remaining his useful possession than trust in her as a person and equal partner. And this is a big reason why I believe a bitter Miss Minutes is even offering to tell this information to Ravonna in the first place, because Miss Minutes knows that giving Ravonna this intel will likely serve to get Ravonna on her side, because Miss Minutes is not a human who can interact with other humans and she needs help. You know, since they were both women who He Who Remains only saw as tools dedicated to him and nothing more. After eons of service as a floating cartoon consciousness, Miss Minutes felt betrayed that He Who Remains never considered giving her a body once before he decided to enact his plan to unalive himself. So now Miss Minutes is seeking her own free will just like Ravonna is. And since Victor Timely just rejected her confession of love, Miss Minutes now sees an opportunity to become allies with Ravonna since they have both become enemies of their enemy. But now let us move on to talking about why He Who Remains could have done all of this to both Ravonna and Miss Minutes, and how the events of Loki episode 3 could potentially explain a lot of He Who Remains' mysterious motivations. And I think it all boils down to the overall Ouroboros theme of this season of Loki. Like I said in my Loki episode 2 theory video that you can check out here, the Ouroboros symbol is super important to this season of Loki because it depicts a snake or a dragon eating their own tail. And because this serpent paradoxically eats themselves to restore themselves, the Ouroboros has been known as a symbol of both creation and destruction throughout various cultures and mythologies. The Ouroboros theme seems to be incredibly influential this season, as a man named Ouroboros has been charged with fixing the giant cosmic Ouroboros that is the sacred timeline, with the Temporal Loom acting as the head of the slithery sacred timeline that is currently choking on its overly branching tails, all while being wrapped around the TVA, much like the Norse serpent Jormungandr wraps itself around the world in Norse mythology. Like I said, I go over all of this in that episode 2 video, so check that out if you haven't already. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up the Ouroboros theme again in this episode 3 centric video is to get you guys to realize how it relates to He Who Remains' overall plan. Because to me, Loki episode 3 is showing us that Kang is a man who was always meant to create his own damn self. The self-destruction of He Who Remains led to the creation of Victor Timely's obsession with time, with the implication possibly being that Kang the Conqueror always creates himself before destroying himself in the end, with Ouroboros' writings in the TVA handbook serving as the main catalyst for the Conqueror's creation, implying to me that there have been multiple multiversal Kang wars in the past, with the actual winner of those wars becoming He Who Remains and ruling at the end of time before sending a copy of the TVA handbook back in time to himself right before he kills himself, so he can ensure Victor Timely becomes Kang in an unending cycle. Because you gotta remember one super important thing from this episode. Ravonna dropped the TVA handbook off in young Victor Timely's life while she was visiting the sacred timeline itself, not one of the newly born branch timelines like Sylvie's McDonald's timeline. This being the case, this means that Ravonna dropping that book off to a young Victor Timely was always supposed to happen as part of He Who Remains' plan, because that's how he believes his life is supposed to go, meaning that that actually did happen in the past of He Who Remains as well. I believe this is how Kang was always meant to begin his journey as a time-traveling conqueror, with the Kang remaining at the end of time, sending his younger self a book with everything he needs to know to begin. All the secrets about the TVA and manipulating time in general. This way, even in death, Kang knows that he always comes back to win his ultimate seat at the end of time as He Who Remains, because he's very likely won this multiversal war over and over and over again. However, what makes the Victor Timely variant from episode 3 special from the infinite amount of Kang variants that have branched since Renslayer first dropped off that book on the sacred timeline is that he specifically is very likely the version of Kang who will become the new reincarnated variant of He Who Remains, because that variant has the one thing that no other Victor Timely variants have: a unique experience with Ravonna Renslayer, Miss Minutes, Mobius, and most importantly, Loki and Sylvie. Yeah, all those variants might have OB's book, but this episode 3 Victor Timely is probably having the same exact experience with Loki and Sylvie that He Who Remains had when he first started off in Chicago all those years ago. And I believe that it is because of this wild experience of meeting Renslayer and Miss Minutes, running from Sylvie, and having Mobius and Loki save his life, that He Who Remains chose all those people as his pawns to end his life in Loki Season 1. Because we cannot forget that everything that is happening in Loki Season 2 is all He Who Remains' will. He planned everything out from the jump. Every single chaotic element of this season was supposed to happen the way it's been happening, because He Who Remains specifically had gone through all of that before. Like, all this dude had to do was tell Miss Minutes to give Renslayer a book, and that book would act as the first domino that would trigger a cascade of chaos that would inevitably lead Victor Timely to becoming the exact reincarnation of Kang that Sylvie dreads the most: He Who Remains. A cosmic game of chess triggered by his favorite chess partner of all time, Miss Minutes. He Who Remains was the only version of Kang with the Loki Season 2 Episode 3 experience, which means to me that the Victor Timely from that episode who met all of these TVA people is the exact seed that He Who Remains wanted to sow for his return to the end of time. Other branched Kang variants will inevitably sprout because Renslayer put that book down with the young Victor Timely, but it is this Victor Timely variant specifically from Episode 3 that is the center of He Who Remains' reincarnation plans. Like, this is all just entertainment for a bored man at the end of time who wanted the cosmos to experience the exact same wild events that happened that led He Who Remains to victory after a massive multiversal time war between all these other Kangs. This all being said, because of what happened to him in Episode 3, Victor Timely will probably go on to create Miss Minutes, develop a relationship with an earlier version of Renslayer, and choose to make Loki and Sylvie's lives a living hell. Also, He Who Remains can remain on top in the end. Like, this dude is playing 5D chess from the grave right now. It's friggin' nuts. But anyways, before I end this video, I want to talk about Victor Timely's Temporal Loom and how we could potentially see a miniaturized Temporal Loom be used to weave together even more crazy chaos for the future of the MCU. If you watched my Loki Episode 1 video where I explain what Temporal Aura is and why a Temporal Aura extractor needed to be used on the rainbow energies of the sacred timeline, I highly recommend that you give that one a watch because I genuinely think it's some good stuff and will help you understand what's going on here. But essentially, I explained that every living being in the MCU has a rainbow aura that makes up their life force, and that is their temporal aura. And this is why people glow rainbow when they get pruned by TVA sticks, and why Wenwu had rainbow energy being sucked out of him by that super soul sucker of a dragon in Shang-Chi. And the reason for this is because during the Big Bang, an unfathomable amount of the 6 infinity energies filled the entire blank dark canvas of the universe with color and the natural laws of science, like gravity, dark energy, dark matter, regular matter, etc. And each of those Infinity Stone colors represents these core parts of science. But anyways, this is what Victor Timely meant in his Time Loom presentation when he speaks about harnessing the power of time that exists all around them. Because the entire Marvel Universe is just a mishmash of all the Infinity Stone energies organized together to create order, the natural law.
When the energy of the past, present, and future flows all around us.
Which is why cosmic microwave background radiation, or CMBR, was such a huge focus point in WandaVision, because Wanda was manipulating the chaos and Mind Stone infinity energies within her to create a new reality. But anyways, for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip all the complicated sciencey stuff, because the main point that you need to know here is that the temporal aura of human beings is the same energy that runs through the sacred timeline itself, and the Temporal Loom. This being said, if the Temporal Loom attached to the sacred timeline can weave the rainbow energies of the timeline into any shape that it wants, then it stands to reason that a miniaturized Temporal Loom could potentially weave the temporal auras of multiple people into a singular being. Like, for example, if OB were to tamper with his temporal aura extractor and make it into a mini temporal loom, then he could do something crazy like merge his own temporal aura with that of the business-minded Victor Timely to create an entirely new being, possibly a new being known as Mr. Griffin. That variant would be a perfect mishmash of both of those people to create a truly formidable new Kang variant from scratch. But that's not all, because remember the ending of Quantumania when Quantumania Kang got sucked into his malfunctioning machine before a blast of energy got sent out everywhere? I have a feeling that Quantumania Kang did not die at all there, but was turned into pure temporal energy, a type of energy from the Marvel comics that Kang turns into called a quantum temporal wave. If someone were to construct a mini temporal aura loom, they could theoretically extract Quantumania Kang's energies and reconstruct his body just in time for Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. I mean, if the TVA can manipulate and weave together the infinity energies of the sacred timeline with a time loom, then the infinity energies within living beings can be manipulated and woven as well. Like, it would kind of be crazy if something happened to cause Loki and Sylvie to be woven together by the end of the series to create a completely new version of Loki who has confronted all of his demons and has learned to love himself and others on a much deeper level. Like, I feel like that type of union would be super special in my opinion, rather than, you know, them being in a relationship, because that's kind of weird. But anyways, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Like, I love this episode so much, and I wish I had more time to fully explain the science behind Victor Timely's Time Loom presentation, because it's some really interesting and exciting stuff in my opinion. Like, I got so freaking excited when he started talking. I was like, oh my god, this man is speaking my language. But in order for me to explain all that, I would have to fully explain the Infinity Stone science of the MCU that I call the Marvel trigger theory. And that would be much better served as its own separate video another time, because good god, is that a very complex subject. But trust me, once you understand it, you will see how it affects pretty much every single MCU project since the days of The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2. I promise you, it's literally the greatest thing I've ever done. I freaking love the Marvel trigger theory. If you guys want to see a video about that, let me know in the comment section below and I'll make that happen. It's literally the thing that excites me the most about the MCU, hands down. But anyways, you can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter if you guys want to see me tweet some really fun theories and really weird shit. But most importantly, do not forget to follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube because we got some really great stuff for you on the regular. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys so much. And I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.